Welcome to our Crucial Conversations Episode 2. We're glad that you've joined us. We're taking this time to talk about some crucial conversations of things and topics that are heavy on our minds and hearts, and hopefully will be beneficial to those who are watching. Today, we have a good friend, Jim Olsen, with us, and he is a CPA for nearly 35 years. And we're going to be talking about money matters. Matter of fact, it's so important today that I wore my green sport coat because my wife says it should not be worn really at all. But I figure if we're going to be talking about money, we might as well go ahead and wear it and get some use out of it. But nonetheless, we're glad that you're here. And we're going to talk about money matters. And Jim's a good golfing buddy. And I love to play golf with Jim. My scores are usually much lower when I play with Jim. He has a whole booklet of rules that I don't think they're certified by the PGA, but nonetheless, we have a good time, don't we? We have a great time. But you have a heart for ministry. Money's close and dear to your heart, and making sure that people understand the biblical concept of it, and what you have written in a booklet, which he has, and it will be made available free of charge. There will be an email at the bottom of our screen that you can just send your name and address and information to Jim Olsen, and he will make sure free of charge that you get one of his booklets. It's very valuable. It's a good booklet. And we're going to talk about some of the information, maybe a little bit that's shared in there as well. And so the Bible has a lot to say about money. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But one of the things I always grew up hearing this, at least a connotation, I don't know if it was meant that way or not, but that if you have money, apparently you're wrong. It's sinful to be rich. But as I read Scripture, it just simply seems to signify that God blesses in different measures in different ways. And to those who have a wealth of money, there comes with it really a set of extra burden on their hearts and lives. And so he addresses that and says, listen, just be good stewards of it. That's what I want you. I've trusted you with it. And really with any amount of money, it seems to be that way. And in 1 Timothy over in chapter 6, it says, listen, here's something I need you to share with those that are rich. So there was that possibility. And simply saying, listen, eternity is really what matters, and building up for treasures in heaven. And we as poor people should not envy those that are super wealthy, because we can only eat the same amount of food, we can only wear certain amounts of clothing, and when it's all said and done, a steward over $10 and a steward over $1 million, we still need to be good stewards. And so as we look at this thought today, money's mentioned a lot in Scripture. And so from a Christian CPA's perspective, deal with that issue, if you don't mind, about the Bible's mentioning of money.
It's interesting that many people are not aware of how much the Bible does have to say about money. Howard Hendricks made the statement that Jesus had more to say about money and possessions than heaven and hell combined. I didn't do the counting, but somebody counted and said that there's 500 verses in the Bible on prayer and faith, but over 2,000 verses in the Bible on money and possessions.
Wow.
If you look at the 30 parables, close to 15 of the 30 parables deal with money or possessions. Now, my memory's not as good at 78 as it was back at 58 when I put all this together, but so I brought some cheat sheets. But
we were a little shady at 58 too, but hey, we're glad you brought notes.
There are, as I mentioned, 50 verses on the prayer and faith and 2,000 on money and possessions. On the parables, names like the hidden treasure, the pearl of great price, the unmerciful servant, the laborers in the vineyard, the lost coin, even the prodigal son who spent it all, the rich fool. That's just a handful of them, and like I said, I think it's about 12 out of the 30 verses.
Wow.
The thing about money, and I think the reason why Jesus had so much to say about it, is we are affected by money every day of our lives in one of four ways. Either we're earning it, or we're spending it, or we're saving it, or hopefully we're giving it to the Lord's work. So a day doesn't really go by without us being impacted one way or the other.
Right.
Even elderly folks who are no longer working, their Social Security check is still working for them, so they get still the benefit of earning from that standpoint. The Bible pretty much put finances in 4 different levels, with giving being probably the number one as far as impact. Second of all was paying taxes, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Thirdly is paying debts, must pay our debts, and fourthly is providing for our family. So the Bible, as you said, has much to say about it. A London paper offered a prize for the best definition of money, and here's the winning answer. Money is an instrument that can buy you everything but happiness and pay your fare to every place but heaven.
Wow.
So, again, the reason why the Bible says so much is because it impacts us every day of our life. There's no question about it.
Wow. Yes, it does. You know, I think one of the keys of helping to try to help us to get the best bang for our buck is through a budget. Mm-hmm. And I have become a firm believer in budgets, and I'm assuming in our conversations that we have had, you do as well. I heard a statement quite some time ago that a budget helped me with, and that is planned giving is happy giving. And I remember just newly married, you know, missionaries would come and they would tell the stories, and man, you just wish you could give, you know, you wish you could give $1,000 or $500, but newly married, you know, you just thought, you know, what do we have? What could we give? And I thought there's got to be something better to this. And so we, you know, when you look at a budget and you begin to say, hey, listen, out of what we have, this is going to be for giving. All of a sudden, when those issues arise, an emergency at church, a family in need, or a missionary service that you want to give a little extra in, when you have that there in your budget planned, man, it's just a joy to be able to say, here it is, this is a joy, it's a delight. You know, and even the Lord pressures you every now and then and says, you know, I need you to give a little more, but faith steps in. But yet at the same time, budgets help tremendously in so many levels. What's your thoughts on budgets?
Probably one of the things in my seminars that really woke people up was when I would start talking about budgets, because many times they'd break out in a cold sweat thinking, well, if I have a budget, I can't ever buy anything. Well, the whole purpose of a budget is so that you can arrange your finances so that you're not overspending or undergiving or undersaving or whatever it might be. In my manual, I do have a budget format that you can make copies of and then fill out on each month a projected budget. And the thing with having a budget is we know where the checks are going that we write for a home payment or a car payment or whatever, or tithe or whatever. But it's the $1 here, the $5 here, the 10 here, the 20 here that adds up to big money.
Right.
And therefore, we don't have an accounting of it. We don't know where it went. So the secret to a budget is, number one, for the first month, keep track of everything you spend, especially the non-check items. Therefore, you know where it's gone. And then as you put those numbers down on this budget format, you determine where you need to cut back or where you need to increase, maybe some additional income or whatever. But the biggest advantage of budgeting is eliminating wasteful spending. And another big advantage of it is if you're in debt, I don't see how you can get out of debt without a budget, because how do you know how much you can start setting this? How do you know how much you can save that you've been spending that you don't need to spend, that you could set aside to put toward debt? And without a budget, you don't have any. One little side note, for children, if you're paying them a little allowance for taking out the garbage or doing this, give them a little envelope system. One envelope is for giving to the Lord's work. You can then train them how to give to the Lord's work. Another envelope is for saving, and the third envelope is for spending. And show them how that whatever you pay them on a monthly or weekly basis, that they divide that up into the envelopes, and then when the spending envelope is gone, they don't dip into the savings envelope or the giving envelope. And even some adults have learned how to use that system and find it easier to go by, like an envelope for eating out. If I use up that envelope for the month based on my budget, then I don't go out anymore. And you can even take the budget on paper and put it into an envelope system, and therefore take out what you have to from the things you've budgeted, but don't steal it from another envelope.
So in other words, a budget is only going to be as good as we follow it.
Right, absolutely.
It's a somewhat of an accountability to us.
A budget will hold you in check if you allow it to.
One of the quickest ways to go in debt, I think, is undisciplined actions with credit cards.
Credit cards are probably the biggest financial disaster of anything that has money attached to it. I'll give you just a simple example. If you borrow $1,000 at 18% interest, which is not uncommon on a credit card, they'll set that up for on a payment plan, but the minimum payment will be almost entirely interest and very little on the principal. That $1,000 at 18% on a minimum payment would take you 10 years to pay off, because so little of the monthly payment is going on that $1,000. The credit card company just loves your interest, just loves it. And so
that's why they can give it to just about anybody, because they sucker you into $1,000, they got you for 10 years.
I see people pull the wallet out of their pocket, and I see they can hardly close it because they've got so many credit cards in it. Having said all that on credit cards, I almost entirely buy with credit cards with this one caveat. I pay it off in full every month.
Right.
If you can't pay it off in full every month, you need to become a plastic surgeon with no training. Take that credit card with a pair of scissors and cut it up. Cut it up, because the interest is a killer.
Right.
And once you get into that kind of credit card debt, I mean, there's just a noose around your neck that is just unbelievable. People are funny. They spend money they don't have to buy things they don't need to impress folks they don't like.
Wow.
So credit cards, if they're controlling you, you have got to get rid of them. There's no question about it. But if you'll pay it off in full every month, you can almost use it like cash, and there are some benefits to it. But if you can't pay it off, those benefits go out the window when you compare it to interest. Again, in my manual, there's a chart where you can list all of your debts and your interest rates, and then you break down the monthly payments for each one. You take the largest or take the smallest one with the highest interest, and you get that paid off as quickly as possible, so you feel good you've gotten rid of something.
Right.
And you work your way down that little list, starting with the smallest debt and working your way up. So when you solve the one debt, you move that amount of money to the next debt, so you're maybe doubling. And so it's a compounding, so to speak, of a reverse compounding of getting out of debt. And there's a very practical form in there. I didn't design it, somebody did, but it's a great form for getting out of debt.
Okay, great. A question that we wanted to discuss as well is the thought of renting or buying a home, buying a new or used car. What's your thoughts on leasing cars? I know that's a pretty popular thing. Hey, listen, who doesn't want a new car every 2 years? They take care of everything, and what are some of your thoughts on home ownership, new cars, and leases and such?
On renting versus buying, it's basically been said that if you know that you're only going to live in a house for about 5 years, and then you're going to be moving on, or you're not sure that it'll be more than 5 years, that when you consider buying, when you take all the closing costs and all the stuff that, closing costs anymore, they throw everything from soup to nuts in there and make closing costs very, very, very expensive.
Right.
So if you take $5,000-6,000 of closing costs and divide that over 5 years, there's an extra $1,000 a year right there almost that you've spent on top of if you were buying a house. Now there's some caveats to that, such as if you're a fixer-upper type of guy and you can buy something that can be fixed up fairly inexpensively, and you know that based on the market that you can make some money on it, then that might be a little different situation. But that would be an exception.
So anything over 5 years in one place, you would recommend buying rather than renting?
Again, you've got to look at if it was 2008.
Right. Yeah.
Then you wouldn't want to buy anything. But if the economy is such and you knew you're going to be around a while, again, with a budget, save up enough so that you've got some equity. It takes equity to make equity. And so it's all a function of economy, how much you've set aside, what the market's doing right now. Like now the market is in Florida, you can hardly find a house to buy.
Right.
Here, especially here in Hobe Sound. So it's a function of that. On the new versus used car, you got to remember when you buy a new car and you drive it over the off the showroom floor, your depreciation just hits you for probably $4,000 or $5,000 because people don't think about depreciation, but that thing's going down, down, down in value. And the thing with a used car is there's so many good used cars out there that you can buy. You don't necessarily have to go through a dealer. Shop the market, especially if you know how to check a car out, whatever, because dealers definitely are charging you more.
Sure.
But if you can find somebody that's hurting for finances and needs to get their car sold so they can pay some bills, then that's the type of person you want to look for. As far as buying versus leasing, my dad was in the automobile business for many, many years. He said it's always more expensive to lease because all you see is the $250 a month payment, but you don't see the upfront payment. If you go over a certain number of miles, you pay a mileage rate, which is very high, and then there's a buyout rate at the end. So leasing is almost always more expensive, especially if you can find a good used car.
Okay. You do seminars, and you've talked with a lot of not just elderly folk, people my age and younger, the importance of having a will, the importance of having your house in order, so to speak, at the end of life for those who are going to be taking care of all of the things when you're gone. And it's two different things perhaps right there, but what are your thoughts on that, on the will and the final preparations for life?
Well, for a younger couple, especially with children, it's imperative that they assign, if they pass away, who gets their children. I mean, if the court assigns them to Uncle Charlie, who was a disaster raising his kids, you don't want them raising your kids. So, again, without a will, the courts can enter into the situation and
Right.
things can end up not being what you want them to be. But it doesn't really matter whether you're young or older. A will is a necessity because there's so many things. I mean, I know of people that have passed away without a will, and it's a nightmare for the family to, especially if there's any kind of friction in the family, as to who gets what and so on, and who's the beneficiary. So a husband and a wife both need individual wills. Individual wills. You don't want a joint will, because if one passed away and then the other passed away before they had a chance to make out a will, then one died with one and one died without one. So you can just about reverse everything from the husbands to the wives and so on. Now, almost everything on a husband and wife situation will automatically pass to the surviving spouse. But it still wouldn't hurt to have everything in joint names, personal, not business stuff, but personal stuff in joint names, so that it automatically passes on to them. But a will, and in this, again, in my booklet, in the back section is a section especially for older people, except the will part. Well, all of it could be used by anybody, but specifically, it has things like surrogate for health care, durable power of attorney, a will form, an actual will with sample will that is actually my will with everything blanked out, and then a form that they can use to make up for their husband one and the wife one. I've done a number of wills for folks in the church, and I don't charge anything like an attorney would. But yes, a will is an the crazy part is that probably, I think I've read 75% of people don't have a will.
Wow.
And that's sad, very sad. And especially people that could leave some money to the Lord's work and never made provision for it, and the kids got it, maybe kids aren't serving the Lord. I mean, there's lots of reasons why you need a will, and not any reason that I can think of if you don't want a will.
Sure. That's pretty important stuff, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share with us. Again, if you will look at the email address that is at the bottom of your screen and send in your name and your address, Jim will make sure that you get one of his booklets sent to you, and you can download it. You can make as many copies as you need to help you out through your process in the budget and so on and so forth. And we hope that some of this has just been helpful to you as we did a little conversation about money matters. Jim, thanks so much for coming and being part.
Could I add one thing about the book?
Sure.
I will electronically send it to them. They can pick and choose what chapters they may want and just print those out. And like you say, they can pass it on to any members of the family. Also, if there's any ministers or treasurers listening or watching, I put together a little 11-page thing on ministers and taxes. I'll be glad to send that to them.
Awesome.
Because a lot of treasurers don't know all the ramifications for the IRS, because the IRS treats pastors as a different breed of cat than a typical layman. So there's a lot of tricks and whatever. But certainly been a pleasure to be here, and I hope we've shared something that maybe somebody hasn't thought about.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time on Crucial Conversations.